Brilliant. So thank you very much for having me here today. It's great to meet you all and to be here. So I'm Caroline Parnell, and for the last 20 years, I've worked in product management and innovation for mobile operators. And most recently, I was the head of new product innovation at O2. So why am I here today? So I was invited here today, I suppose, just to give a different industry perspective in terms of how we're doing product innovation. And it's brilliant seeing some of the talks today, because I think it might build on quite nicely from some of the themes that you've already been discussing. So it's great to hear Graham talking about, how do you build products that customers really love, but also support your business goals, and a lot of the work that Tracy's doing about how do you really disrupt the market and build some of those future product innovations. So what I'm here to talk to you today is just to give you some experiences and some examples of how we've been doing that in the mobile world. So I thought I'd start with a bit of a story, and I suppose it's a story of how not to do product innovation, but it's an example of my earliest product failure. Hopefully I'm not the only one who has these. I just picked an example from very much at the start of my career in terms of how not to do new product development. And I've looked far back so as not to offend any ex-colleagues if they ever come across this talk. So this is back in 2002 when I first started at Vodafone on their graduate scheme. And 2002, so for those of you that had a mobile in 2002, we didn't have smartphones at that time. So if you were lucky enough to have a phone, you probably had one that looked very similar to this. Or if you were really lucky, you might have had a colour screen that looked a bit like this. And the product that I was working on was an enhanced voicemail service called Vodafone Mail. And this was a product that brought together all your voicemails, your emails, and your fax messages into one inbox. And then customers could access that inbox through the web, through the mobile web, or through their voicemail inbox. And this product offered hundreds of features. You could get notified as soon as you had a new email, a fax, or a voicemail. You could have your emails read out to you. You could have your fax headers read out to you if you really wanted to. Loads of different features that you could use. And me and the team that I was working with, we worked really hard building out all our IT requirements, integrating this product into all of our billing systems. It was a lot of effort over about 2 years. But about 2 months before our launch, signs were looking really good and we were on track. So we'd done some high-level concept work with customers, but we thought now was the time to really go and show our customers our product and test some of our product positioning and our marketing messages that we wanted to take out to the market. Customers hated it. They didn't understand the product. They didn't understand why they would need the product. They couldn't really understand why they needed instant notification about fax messages. They thought the voice that read out their emails sounded quite robotic, sort of unnatural, just really sort of low appeal. And the recommendation from that research to the team at the time was our marketing needs to work really well to convince our customers why they would need this product. Hopefully you can hear the sarcasm in my voice there, but that was what we did. We focused on our marketing messages and making sure we'd have a really impactful launch when we launched 2 months later. So 2 months later, we had a big ta-da out in the market talking about this new product and why our customers would want it. Unsurprisingly, there was tumbleweed, so really low customer take-up. People just didn't get why they needed to take this product and why they needed to use it. People certainly weren't using the premium features that our business case had been built on. And 18 months later, we were taking this product down and closing it down. And this is just an example of where product development can go really wrong. But let's be honest, this isn't a unique example. It's not unique to telcos and it's not unique to 2002. And it's easy to look back in hindsight and say, why did people even need fax messages on the move? What a ridiculous product. But at the time, people genuinely thought they were building a product that was really game-changing, that was going to disrupt the market and really excite our customers. So what went wrong? So in my mind, in this example, there were 3 things that went wrong. So the first off was the product idea was flawed from the start. Some of you might have come across this product Venn diagram that talks about the 3 key elements that has to be there for any new product innovation. Desirability, so meeting a key customer need or solving a customer problem. Viability, so a viable business case, business model that you can sustain over time. Feasibility, so it's something that really sits with your business's existing assets and competencies. And if we're honest, the product that we were building, it was a unified messaging solution, but it clearly sat in the feasibility bucket. We weren't solving a clear customer problem, and we hadn't tested out a clear business model over time. And the second key problem was our process. So this was very traditional, long, lengthy governance processes to secure fundings, CapEx and OpEx, to set up product teams that were going to build this product over the course of about 2 years. And once you've done that, it becomes incredibly hard to then change direction because you've got all of those resources in place. So we got overexcited, we overinvested, and then it became too big to fail. And then the third area, of course, is the customer input came far too late in the product development process. And at the time, there was quite a dangerous quote that was used back then and sometimes still is used today that I think people misinterpreted. But it was the Henry Ford quote: if I had asked people what they'd wanted, they would have said faster horses. And back then, people genuinely took this to mean customers didn't know what they want. It was our job as the experts to come up with what those products were, and then convince customers as to why they would need them. What was really frustrating is if we had have spoken to customers, we probably would have found there were 1 or 2 features that they liked, and we could have pivoted to those features. Just to give an example, when we launched the product, customers loved the fact that they could see their voicemails in a really clear line of which of their contacts had left a voicemail, and they could then click on those voicemails individually, which was something that just didn't exist at the time. And interestingly, about 5 years after this product, Apple then launched a product that is known as visual voicemail. That was a massive differentiator for Apple and has now been adopted by all operating systems. So if we'd have listened to our customers, we could have come up with a really compelling product. And like I say, this isn't unique to mobile operators at that time. This happens all the time today in companies big and small. Companies that fall in love too early with their product idea, and then they're not able to change direction even if they wanted to. I thought it was quite interesting, this stat from the late Professor Clayton Christensen, who's an expert and an author around innovation. 30,000 new products introduced every year, and 95% of them fail. That's a huge amount of failure where we're just not getting that product development and that innovation right. As has been touched on today, we're in an incredibly unusual time, an incredible amount of change, disruption happening on our market. More so than ever, future business success depends on our ability to explore, to experiment, and to find those new growth opportunities. I saw quite an interesting stat from the insurtech world that said every month 10 new insurtech startups are launching. So people are continually trying to disrupt some of those traditional industries. I really believe that to develop a strong capability around product discovery and innovation really can become a big superpower for our businesses. So as I mentioned, my most recent role was Head of New Product Innovation at O2. And for this role, this was a completely new team that O2 hadn't had before. So setting up that team from scratch, I was looking at what was the latest thinking around lean startup, design thinking, those types of areas that we could embrace. And we tried a few different things over the course of about 18 months. And I wanted to share with you today some of the things that really worked well for us. So in my mind, I think there are 3 key areas to get right when doing new product development or innovation. Your process for capturing new ideas, prioritising those ideas using tools like customer empathy and collaboration. Second, your process. So making sure you have a robust process that can progress the good ideas through your business and, of course, stop the bad ones. And then thirdly, rapid experimentation. So having that obsession for regular and early customer feedback and experiments as part of that process. So to start with new ideas, how to sort of capture some of those new ideas. I often think nowadays the easy part often is building out a new product. The really hard part is finding what product you actually want to build. So the first recommendation I would say is really know your purpose for innovating. Really know what it is you're trying to achieve and what innovation territories are the most interesting for you. And then be really open about sharing those territories so that people across your business know what you're looking for. And to that end, be open to new ideas coming from anywhere across your business. So at O2, we really encouraged ideas from our frontline staff, in our stores, in our call centres, from other teams that just weren't related to product development. Really encouraged them to come up with ideas, and we were clear how they would submit those ideas, where they would send them, what the process was, and how it would happen. And I think what's interesting on this point is it's not just important from an idea generation point of view, although that is useful. It's actually really important for creating a strong innovation culture of ownership of innovation internally. I think it's very dangerous if people across the business see that innovation and future growth is one team's responsibility. It isn't. The future success of a company depends on everybody in that company. And then have a really clear problem statement for your ideation. So once you know what territory is interesting, really frame a problem or a challenge from a customer's viewpoint. Just to give you an example of where we did this at O2, one of the projects that we were looking at was around mobile phone repairs. This might have some parallels with the insurance world. But we were asked by an internal stakeholder to look at, could we do some ideas around doing in-store mobile phone repairs? So a customer could turn up to one of our stores, immediately get a repair quote, book their device in, and then have it repaired whilst they wait, and then leave the same day. And this seemed like a sensible idea. We knew customers had lots of broken phones. We knew there was a market for it. And of course, we had the technology to make that happen. But before we jumped into ideation, we decided to just sit with the idea for a little bit longer. And we went and had informal conversations with probably about 6 people that had recently had a broken phone that they had to get repaired. And we just had some conversations with those people to say, well, what are the different options that you considered when getting that phone repaired? Who did you speak to? What research did you do? What considerations were important in how you made that choice? And it was just so interesting hearing some of those stories. And what it really brought to life for us was people make very different decisions depending on things like, have they got a spare phone sat in a drawer somewhere, in which case they're less bothered about being without a phone. What is the value of that phone? Because actually, if the phone's only worth £40, you're not going to spend £300 getting it repaired. And also convenience to them. So for a lot of people, going to a high street store just wasn't an option. So they were looking at solutions where they could send it away to get it repaired. So just by doing this, we really nailed down those key criteria of, convenience and price and the time that customers would be without their phone. And this enabled us to reframe our problem statement around the customer, around, how do we help our customers to get a working phone within 24 hours at a price that works for them. And just by doing that, we really broadened out our ideation workshops. And some of the ideas that were coming back were things like, could you have an online tool where we did some of the calculations for a customer to say, they put in their details of their phone, they put in the damage to the device, and we can tell them, what's the quote for getting it repaired? But what's the quote for upgrading your phone early so you can just get a new device? What's the quote for trading in that device and maybe swapping it out with a refurbed phone? So that was one idea. Another one was looking at things like Uber-style couriers. So you could just go into an app, request a driver who would come, collect your phone, take it away, repair it, and bring it back the same day. And interestingly, when we test our 6 final ideas with customers, including in-store repairs was the least popular with customers because it just didn't offer anything different to what they could already do today. So broadening out that problem statement can really help when trying to come up with ideas. Also important is around the aspects of encouraging collaboration and diverse thinking. So I don't know about the people here today, but I have sat in some awful brainstorms over the years, just really badly run, often the same few people dominating the conversation. And quite often you leave thinking, just rehashed a lot of the same old ideas that keep coming up time and time again. So at O2, we spent quite a lot of time looking at this to say, well, how do we really change how we run some of our ideation workshops? One of the things we did was we really extended out our invites to those sessions to make sure we had much more diverse opinions and perspectives in the room. So we might invite our colleagues from strategy, from finance, from insights team to make sure we had some well-rounded perspectives. The other thing we would do is we would actually allow slots within those workshops for internal or external experts to come and talk to us and to give us a chance to ask them questions. And this could be frontline staff, in some cases it was customers. In some cases, it was actually industry experts or academics or even startups that just had a radically different view to the problem that we were trying to solve. And when you're inviting those diverse thinkers, it's really important to make sure that you allow them to have a voice in that session. So we were using design thinking tools like silent brainstorming, where everyone works on their ideas independently and in silence before having equal airtime to share them back with the group. Then encouraging people to build on those ideas before silently and individually voting on which ideas should go through to the next round. And that really helped, again, improve the creativity and the extent of the disruption of the ideas that were coming up in those sessions. And the next aspect is that, be clear about what your criteria are for how you're then going to rank those ideas that are coming into your team or that you're coming up with. So for us, we had 4 clear criteria around what's the extent that it's really delighting our customers and doing something different they couldn't otherwise get. What's the long-term revenue potential for our business of linking it to our business KPIs? What's the fit with our longer-term business strategy? And how complex and how much effort is it to deliver this product? Another tool that we found really helpful, some of you might have used, was the impact and effort matrix. And we were using a lot of this a lot of the time in our workshops. So very simply, impact is impact to the business, which could be revenue, which could be delighting your customers, could be managing costs, could be something else. And effort, of course, is the complexity of delivering it. So how much it's going to cost, the time it's going to take to actually deliver it to market. And of course, with this, you are ideally looking for the high impact, low effort, quick wins that you can then take forward to the next stage of your process. Which brings me on to process. So I think it's once you've come up with all of those ideas and you've had all those ideation sessions, too often it ends there because people don't really know what to do next. There's nowhere for those ideas that you've generated to go. So I think it's really important to have a process where you can very clearly prioritise those ideas as they're going through that process and make sure you're doing everything you can to fast track the best ideas through your business. So for us at O2, we came up with, I think what's termed an agile stage gate process, where we had 5 stages around discover, design, prove, build and growth. What would happen is as a new idea came into the team, it would be assigned to a product manager and quite quickly turned into a very basic 1-pager template that really focused on the key aspects of the customer, the commercials and the technology. And we did that very deliberately because we wanted to avoid people spending all their time working on beautiful PowerPoint decks, but rather just get to the crux of the idea. So the product manager would take it through each of those stages, and at the end of each stage was a very light touch gate review where we had our senior stakeholders sat in the room, and the person owning that product would have to recommend, do we stop that idea because actually it's not going to go anywhere? Do we park it for a future point? Maybe the technology is not ready yet. Or do we proceed through to the next gate? And if you do want to proceed, what sorts of resources do you need to make this idea a success? And one of the things we paid particular attention to was the funding process within that. As I alluded to with the Vodafone Mail example, all too often today, innovation and product development is inhibited still by yearly funding cycles. You could have the best idea in the world, but if you have it at the wrong time of the year when budgets have already been set, it's really hard to get investment for it. So what we did was we got board approval pot. So we had access to CapEx and OpEx. Of course, that money has to bring back revenue over the long term, but it enables you to be much more flexible in year about where you invest that budget. And this was great for our stakeholders because they could clearly see the budget they'd got, the process, the ideas that we had in that process, and make sure that budget was being prioritised on the right ideas. And it was also great for our product managers as well because they knew that if they had a good idea, there was resources and budget that was available to them to make it, to turn it into a reality. And once you've got that process in place, it's really important to make sure you're measuring how successful that process is in doing what you need it to do. And for us, we looked at soft and hard measures. So soft measures were things like how many ideas have we got at each stage of the process? What's the speed of those ideas travelling through the process? And how many ideas are actually converting into direct customer trials or eventual product launches? Hard measures was very much a revenue lens. So that was looking at, for all those ideas in that process, what's the future value to O2 of those ideas? And on top of that, we would overlay a risk factor that took into account that these were a very early stage in the process. The other thing we did measure as part of that was how happy were our people that were using this process. We spent a lot of time looking at what was working for them, what wasn't working, and what could we do better to make this process even easier to use. So talked about new ideas, talked about process, and the third element, and one of the most important, is around developing that obsession for early and regular customer feedback. And I do believe still that most of us are doing our customer testing all wrong. I think it's one of the things that we all like to talk about, but if we're honest, we're still not using it in the right way. I think one of the big problems for this is when someone hits on a great idea, they want to do a certain amount of due diligence before they share with customers. And that due diligence could be fleshing out the proposition in a bit more detail. It could be having a high-level business case or some feasibility just to make sure it's going to be a good idea. But then once you've done that, you're then recruiting trialists, potentially putting a brief in for your research. And all of that leads to the fact that by the time you're actually sharing it with a customer, months have gone by. And the problem, of course, with that is you are already financially and emotionally invested in that idea. So it becomes a lot harder to hear the feedback. So I really recommend test your new ideas within days of coming up with it, so you can get that instant feedback, and you'll find that it's much easier to hear some of those challenges, some of those objections, and of course you've got lots of time to be able to make some changes to tweak your product. So I'm just going to talk quickly about three of the tools that we used around sort of customer testing that were most useful for us. The first was, of course, customer interviews. So customer interviews are just such a useful tool. They're low cost, they're easy to set up. It's a great way to make sure you truly understand the lives, the motivations and the problems of your target customers. One of the ways we used this recently at O2 was we were looking at some new products around health tech, so connected devices in the home that would enable people to track elderly or vulnerable people just to make sure they were okay or they hadn't suffered a fall. And very early in the stages that we were looking at it, there were so many different directions that we could go in. So we just went and had really informal conversations. And most of this was with friends, family, internal friendly colleagues that we knew were carers for somebody that was important to them. And again, we just had a conversation around what were some of the challenges that they had, what were the different things that they'd used to help them in the past. And it was so useful around it either validated some of the things we'd already been thinking about or actually completely invalidated some of the stuff that we were thinking about exploring. But it did that really early on. It challenged our thinking at the time that maybe the mobile device could be the centre of some of these solutions. And by having those conversations, we realised that just wasn't right for this sort of target market. It was probably more likely to be either wearables or Internet of Things sensors within the home. The second tool that we found really useful for adding value to those customer interviews is around prototypes or low fidelity prototypes, but things that you can do to just fake the product early on in the simplest way as possible. So for us, using things like fake web landing pages or fake app screens where you've got something you can show a customer. When you do this, it just prompts a much more genuine and honest reaction from customers, and they'll very quickly tell you what they like, what they don't like, what they think's missing. And again, quick example of how we did this was we were doing some ideation around fintech. So we ran a design sprint and our team came up with 5 ideas, and we thought these were all sort of good ideas. We wanted to take them to our customers. And in just about half a day, the team mocked up these landing page screens that looked and felt as much like a genuine O2 landing page as they could. And it was so interesting when we put these in front of customers, how quick customers were to point out what they liked, what they didn't like, but also for the people that had been working on those products, how open they were to that feedback, because it was so early in the process, they weren't yet attached to them. And very quickly off the back of that feedback, we completely scrapped 3 ideas, and 2 of them we refined significantly and then took them through for further testing. And then the third tool is around more robust customer experiments. So this is when you're further on down the process, what are the things that you can do to really test with customers? What are your biggest hypotheses or things that you want to get right to know that your product's going to be a success in the market? One of the ways we did this was through a product that we were looking at called Connected Car. And this was a hardware product that plugged into the footwell of a car. It would act as a Wi-Fi hotspot, but it would also give the user diagnostic information about the health of their car. We'd been looking at this idea for a while, and we'd done some high-level testing work, which all seemed quite positive. But as a team, we just had our doubts as to whether people would really pay for this type of product. So we set up a really simple trial where we got 50 engaged trialists who all said they would use the product for 30 days. We gave them each a device. It wasn't the device that we would have launched with because we hadn't built it yet, but it was the most similar in terms of the features that we were planning to launch with. And these trialists were really engaged. They were using the product every day. They were giving regular feedback. But at the end of the trial, we asked them a series of questions, and one of them was, did they want to pay the price that we were looking at to carry on using the device? And most of them said no. It just didn't offer enough value in their lives. It was just quite clear that it was just something that they could do without and they didn't really need. And of course, that saved us from investing millions of pounds in rolling that product out to market. So they're the main points from me. I suppose the three key takeaways that I'll leave you with in terms of what I've said. I really would, ensure your ideation is focused, collaborative, and embraces diversity. It really does maximise the creativity of the ideas that you'll come up with. Second, invest time in developing out a clear innovation process and continually enhance it. You can always make it better. And third, test your ideas earlier and more frequently than feels comfortable. So you're not making product decisions without having that sort of customer input. And final comment from me is, you've probably seen some of the projects that I've given as examples. None of them were going to radically change the mobile industry, but actually we came up with 4 or 5 products that we took to customers that collectively had a significant impact on the business. So I really would urge you all that are looking at sort of product development, think big, absolutely, have big, bold aims as to what you want to achieve, but really do start small. So find the smallest way that you can get started and test some of those assumptions. And of course, learn fast, not just about your product, but about the best way to do innovation and to make it a success. That's everything from me. I don't know if we've got time for questions, in which case I'm happy to take them. But if not, feel free to get in touch with me on LinkedIn or Twitter. I'm very happy to carry on the conversation.
Thanks, Caroline. That was a really interesting session. We do have time for a couple of questions if anyone wants to ask. We've got a comment from James there just saying thanks and how interesting it was. I thought it was really good that you kind of highlighted the fail fast approach and how that enabled you to get products to market much quicker. And it was nice to see the highlighting of kind of collaboration and diversity because they're values that are really close to our hearts here at Covéa as well.